This video is brought to you by Hegel. So, welcome back to the One Bit Podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing our top 3 pieces of gear or speakers or what have you that we use as reference, or stuff that we think highly of, treasure, and so on, and why that may be.
Okay. Sounds like a fun topic. Why don't you go first?
Okay. All right. I'll take the L. So for me, it's gonna be the Brunoco Terra integrated amplifier.
Okay.
And this might not come as a surprise for many of you, especially those in the patron chat. We had a great talk the other day, and a patron of mine actually asked me, what is a tube integrated amplifier or amplifier that I would recommend for some musicality, not necessarily linearity.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of gear that is linear, that is neutral sounding, that's well balanced, so that I can easily use it to evaluate gear and so on, that I'll mention later in this video. But the Bruno Co is special to me because it's a very unique sound. And I've heard a lot of unique amplifiers, but this one really clicked with me. And if you actually watched my coverage video, this was 2 years ago. I visited Korea in a audio cafe / bar called the Bruno Bar. And I know that some of my viewers actually went there because they, asked me where it was, and they went there, and shared their experiences. And they basically have these big RCA speakers. And, the owner really treasures that speaker. And, it's one of the few left in the world. And he was trying to find a tube amplifier that he can, mate with this speaker. And the story goes, he tried over 100 different pieces and he didn't like any of them. So he decided to make his own. And whether he intentioned it or not, what I found was that the Bruno Co integrated amplifier has that RCA type of sound. And it's really hard to explain. It is a very emotionally engaging sound, at least for me. Mm-hmm. It has this really spacious and airy presentation that, on a tube integrated amplifier, especially, I've never heard before. Mm-hmm. It's the most airy and spacious, almost like a surround system. It just opens up the system. It's effortless, has great bass and, kind of drive to the sound. And the vocals, I know Sean's gonna hate this term, but it sounds very sweet and very delicate. It's very, I don't know, it's emotionally engaging, especially female vocals. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking for linearity, again, there's not going to be it. It's a low powered amplifier, so it's not going to drive every speaker, and hence why it's not always in my system. But when I get a sensitive speaker in, yeah, you bet I'm gonna pair it with the Bruno Co first thing. Okay. Right? But yeah, it's a very interesting, unique tube integrated amplifier. You're gonna either hate the sound signature or you're gonna love it like me. But I don't think there's any in between. You're gonna love it or hate it. But yeah, that's how it goes with unique sounding amplifiers. And I've heard a lot of feedback from other people that have like the Bruno Co saying that it was better than their audio note stuff, right? I had a guy that messaged me saying that this replaced basically their entire audio note system, costing thousands more, mm-hmm. right? And then there's some other people, and then of course there's people that have returned it, saying they didn't like it, right? So of course, like I said, or someone that said it didn't drive my speakers, it was too low powered, mm-hmm. which I did preface in the video. But anyhow, it's not a one fit solution, but I definitely see value in it because I find it just that musical, and engaging for me.
Yeah, so for you, your pick is a Korean integrated amplifier.
Yeah, from some bar in Korea.
Some bar in Korea that was designed for one set of speakers.
And there is some philosophy behind it, like short signal path, like really short signal path. They go into great lengths to do that, by the way, and really high quality transformers that they wind themselves and so on. But the interesting thing is that like I said, it was designed for one speaker in a bar, and it was actually not even a product per se when I went there 2 years ago, and because he made it, but he was like, should I even sell this? Mm-hmm. And I said, please do. I think some people will really appreciate it, like myself. Yeah. So that's how it came to be. So it was really never meant to be he initially made it so that he can give it to some friends, and have it in this bar, right? I actually have the exact same unit they used at the bar. They sent that over to me before they, now it's more refined. Now they've refined it more to ship it to the United States and all that kind of stuff. But the raw amplifier I got in the very beginning was the exact same amplifier that was used in the bar. He just unplugged it and sent it to me.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting experience. It did have few things that needed to be ironed out to be a product. For example, it had left and right individual knobs with no remote. So I was like, can you make that into a single high quality, and that's kind of what he did, and more inputs and output options and so on and so forth. So anyhow, it's a very nice unit that I treasure, and the build quality is absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That's a piece I need here at some point. Yeah. So I guess it's my turn.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, product that would be tough to live without would be the AMR 777 SE CD player. So this is a CD player that I've owned for the better part of 15 years now. So it's been a while.
Yeah.
Been a while.
Yeah.
And I love it. And it's a product that when it's time for it to pass to the great CD player beyond, I don't know what I'm going to do. I genuinely have no idea what I'll replace it with. And here's why. So the 777 SE is actually based off of the first CD player that AMR ever made, which is the 777. And this actually had the legendary Philips TDA 1541 double crown inside, right? And it was a hefty player, weighed a ton. But the problem with it is that it was over-engineered. They threw everything in the kitchen sink at it, and unfortunately that created problems. But the sound quality was amazing. It's hands down the best digital, in my opinion, that I have heard. To even include like many, digital setups that would cost up to $100,000, I would take that player over anything that I've heard, except the reliability was horrible. Absolutely atrocious. In fact, I remember working on 3 of them. Not a lot of fun. So when the 777 SE CD player came out, it was meant to be much more affordable, but much more simplified. Now, of course, it didn't use the legendary Philips 1541, but they did use another Philips chipset that they felt was close in performance to the Legend. Not quite the same, but emulated a lot of the characteristics that people love about that chipset. And what also made the 777, unique is the fact that the transformers were designed from the ground up. You can't buy them anywhere. It's just in that player. There's some capacitors inside that are 3-in-1 capacitors that they were using Dueland as a reference point, and they wanted to see if they could match it, but for a lot less money. Problem is, you can't get those capacitors anywhere else. They're only made by AMR. And the bigger issue is that, for those who don't know, was the head of distribution for AMR/Hi-Fi audio back in, was it 2016 and a part of 2017. So even at the time, I knew that we were having trouble with coming up with boards and parts to service existing 777s. So if there's a failure in my unit with a critical part, like one of those exclusive parts, I am cooked. I'm done. I am done. Now, the reason why I like this player so much, though, is because of the performance. And this is where we get really subjective. So, it was made to sound like analog, but not in the way that a lot of manufacturers would try to implement that kind of a product. Because usually when a CD player is meant to sound analog, what it really means is they just bumped up the mid-range, bumped up the bass, rolled off the treble, and it's meant to give you this artificially smooth and warm sound. Look at how listenable it is, right? It's like vinyl. Well, the 777 SE isn't like that, because while you do get that 3-dimensional body that vinyl is well known for, and you do get a little bit of that warmth, it's not rolled off. It's not overly colored sounding. And that's what I like so much about it. It does what vinyl does well, but it also does what digital can do so well. It's not going to be for everybody, though. It's not the most refined sounding player in the world. So if you like audiophile fireworks, like I like as big of a sound stage as humanly possible, and I like super detailed, airy, in your face treble, you're not going to like this. You're just not. But for somebody who is sensitive to like the natural timbre of instruments and whatnot, it's still to this day my reference point. And I've been searching for over 10 years now for a replacement, and I can't find one. So that's one that when it dies, oh, my heart, it's going to break. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think that's one of those pieces that I've known you have treasured for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
I've actually tried to hunt one down with very little success.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, people who usually get them
because of
hang on to them. So yeah.
Yeah, and maybe the reliability. That's what,
They're either in someone's home and it's still going, or it's in a landfill somewhere. It's one or the other.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I always wanted to hear it. I heard the DAC version, right?
I was only okay with the DAC, which is really weird. I was
That's why when you mentioned the CD, I was like, yeah, I've heard the DAC. It wasn't that. It was great, but it wasn't like as great as you made it sound. The CD player,
Sure.
and the CD player seems to be the real deal.
In my subjective opinion.
No, like other people too. I've spoken to other people that have it. You know, I've begged them to sell it to me, but they were like, no, mine. Yeah, it's a very good piece, I think, considering how many people will never sell it to me.
Yeah.
Including Sean.
Yeah. Well, the deal is when I die that it goes to you.
Too bad it isn't like readily sold these days.
Yeah.
It's not a product that's easily accessible.
Yeah. I mean, they were supposed to relaunch a new like super expensive reference line, but that never really came into fruition that I know of. So I think the focus is on hifi. But yeah, that's my baby. Anyways, your turn. Number two.
Number two is going to be no surprise, and I swear to God, I'm not trying to be biased towards Korean brands. But next one is also a Korean brand, and it's going to be the Platimons. And it's really no surprise because the monoacoustic Platimons have been my reference speakers for the last 3 years. So that's like my main speakers. And I actually made a video on my reference system, so to speak, and the system I built around the Platimons for myself. And there's a reason behind that, and I wish I emphasized that more in that video over my emotional reaction to the sound. But anyhow, I hope the point was made across, and I'll make that distinction here again. The Platimons are not plug and play speakers. So initially, I really didn't like the sound of Platimons. I really appreciated what it did, just like how I can appreciate what Focal does, what Magical does, but it was in that realm. Too clinical for me, too analytical for me, too bright for me, too thin sounding for me.
Yeah.
Virtually everything I didn't like about my sound profile, the Platimon was what it was.
Sure.
And to be fair, when I heard it, it was like prototype phase, right? And they did have it with pretty bright gear and so on. And when they sent me the first revision, it wasn't my favorite. And then they sent me the final revision, which was the Platimons that we see now. And something drastically had changed. And maybe it was my input, maybe it was not, I don't know. I will never know. But at the time I had a talk with the engineer, and the engineer was asking me, what do you think? And I, gave my 2 cents, right? I appreciate what you do, but this is how I feel about the sound. This is the type of sound I like, and so on and so forth. And somehow I just couldn't help but feel like the engineer had taken some of that feedback and utilized it, because the sound now was transparent and airy, but it had thickness in the mid-range. It had body to the sound.
Yeah.
It had bass. I was like, wow, this is... And I never heard the combination of warmth and transparency at the same time before. I thought those were two like opposing like terms almost, right? Like it's almost like me saying it's bright but also warm.
Yeah.
Like how is that possible, right? But this was like warm and inviting, and even almost thick. It's not like thick, but like it had body to the sound. It had muscularity in the mid-range. But then the high frequency was spacious, and that transparency in the mid-range was still there. It was like a really nice balance. And long and behold, gear matching definitely matters with this speaker. even as the tuning it is now, when I pair it up with thin sounding amplifiers, yes, we're back to that thin sounding from mid-range and up. You still get bass, which is interesting, but you almost feel like it's disconnected. But when you pair it up with the right type of gear, which I tend to like the more warmer and richer sounding gear, like for example, the Eversolo F10 that I just reviewed was a phenomenal pairing with the speaker, despite it being not that expensive, right? Considering the price of these speakers. So, and when you made it, it has that transparency. And because I review speakers, I change speakers out all the time. And when I switch out the Platimons, every single time, the thing that I miss is that transparency. And as someone, as you may know, Sean, that didn't appreciate the transparency factor as much before, it was almost a shock to me that I missed that transparency on the speaker. It's almost addicting. That's how I put it. Mm-hmm. And there's a few people in my Patreon group and otherwise that have bought the Platimons, and they see the exact same thing, is that it's almost addicting, that transparency. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I like about this speaker. It's not a perfect speaker. It's not the most linear speaker. It's not the most, measuring speaker or whatnot. And the bottom module, same thing. Like, it has a super tweeter in the front. There's a lot of design choices that I wouldn't like, that I thought would be not ideal in a speaker design.
Sure.
But the ending result is that, like, I just dig the sound. It may not be the most linear and neutral sound if that's what you want, but it is so dang transparent and inviting and warm at the same time if you have it set up with the right gear. And that's the big distinction, is if you have it set up with the right gear. Because otherwise, if you put the wrong gear in, it can sound thin. It can sound too clinical, unless that's your thing, right? So yeah, it's a very special speaker, and I've had it for the last 3 years as my reference speaker. So I had time to like play around with it and really kind of grow into the sound of the Platimons, as well as like catering gear towards the setup, right? So you'll see in my videos, I have this speaker set up a lot of the times, and that's precisely why. I change speakers all the time, but these are the speakers that I gravitate towards for my personal musical enjoyment as of 2025.
Okay. So your choice is yet another Korean brand that is very particular, or a product from Korea that's very particular to work with.
I promise my third one will not be Korean. But I think it's also a bit challenging because at this point in time, I've been through a lot of different speakers. So yeah, there's like speakers that are more neutral, easier to work with.
True.
For sure. But when you get a speaker like the Platimons right, there's certain aspects that I can't explain that just maybe it's a sense of achievement. I don't know. I don't know if I get a sense of achievement from getting that right, but it just sounds so incredibly musical, and it's something that I can't just simply put into words unless using terms that's hyperbolic. But
you've already gone through all the adjectives. No, it's a speaker I would like to hear, because I know you and quite a few other people we both know have had many great things to say about it. It's something that I will likely do when my head's above water and I just don't have a house full of hi-fi waiting for a review. But it's something I look forward to hearing, because the one thing about transparency, as I define as transparency, is when you listen to a speaker, amp, or just a system that makes subtle detail easy to hear. In other words, detail that may almost sound hidden on many systems. On a transparent quote unquote system, it's almost like it was never hidden at all. So like it was just right in the forefront of the mix. And that's a very unique experience. And when you get used to it, it's pretty shocking to go to something that doesn't quite have that same, effortlessness of
like, I've never heard a speaker that is transparent, but wasn't bothersome to my ears, like bright. And that's that's why I appreciate Focal and Magical, but I've never heard those speakers without being fatigued, and that's kind of my gripe with it, right? But maybe if I spend enough time with those speakers, maybe I can cater a system in that way. I don't know. But with the Platimons, like I just love how it sounds, and I think you might be actually appreciating it because it's kind of like the same deal with the Hawk speakers, the Totem Hawk speakers that you've encountered, where you have to have a specific setup and whatnot but when you do, you're heavily rewarded. And that's how I feel about the Platimons, is that it's definitely not a plop and play speaker. You have you gotta have the right placement, you gotta have the right gear.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
get it.
you have to treat it like, a little baby. But when it clicks, oh man, that's something that is, at least for me up until now, unrivaled.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's something I look forward to checking out one day. I guess it'd be my turn, and it's going to be a set of speakers. Everyone who knows me are already going to know this. So that's going to be the Harbeth P3 ESRs, the originals. So how do I say this? These are a set of speakers that, kind of in theme with most of this conversation, is something that is going to be application specific. In other words, this isn't a speaker that I can recommend to most people. It's either for a small room, and for my use case is for desktop listening, where the speaker is literally only a couple feet from the physical location of your head. In this application, I love this speaker for numerous reasons. I love the way it looks. I love the history of Harbeth, but I also love the way that it sounds, because in this ultra near field environment, the compromises of a small sealed speaker are mostly mitigated, right? Because you don't need to listen at loud volumes. You don't need full range. You don't need to fill a big room with sound. And because of the voicing and how natural they are in the mid range, or at least in my opinion, how natural sounding they are in the mid range, not only does it sound great with human speech, but it also sounds great with everything. Whether I'm listening to metal, whether I'm listening to electronic, hip hop, classical, jazz, electronic music, it is down for whatever. And it's not picky with amplifiers. Like, one of the more common questions I receive from people who come across my Harbeth, P3 videos is, what amp should I get? What amp should I get? And it's like, no, that's the great part about it. It doesn't matter. It could be a Sony receiver. It could be $3,000, $5,000 amp. It doesn't matter. Yes, it can impact the sound a little bit, but it kind of doesn't matter as long as it's a decent amp that does what you need it to do as far as volume output is concerned for the speakers. But yeah, I really like them. And it's something that I've owned the P3 since they originally came out, I think well over 10 years ago. And I don't plan on replacing them, because I've tried so many different little mini monitors in this desktop environment, and I've tried so many different pro audio solutions, to include stupidly expensive ones costing over $20,000. I would take this over all of them. And I've been looking for something that would displace them, and to even include real LS35As, and nothing. I just really like how they sound in this application. Unlike when you heard them in a big room, you're listening to them in this unfamiliar room, big space, totally not at all what they're doing.
I'm convinced there was something wrong. Yeah, I'm convinced there was something wrong with those speakers, man.
Nah.
There's no way. There's no way. Like, it was so, anyways, so my third one and my last one here is going to be there. I have more, but I'll keep it at that, and it's no secret again as to what my reference pieces are. But again, another piece that I've had for and owned for about 3 years now, ongoing, and that's going to be the AGD Audience. It's a Class D amplifier, and it's the only Class D amplifier to me that doesn't sound like a Class D amplifier.
Yeah.
And one of the obsessions of me finding a Class D amplifier that doesn't sound like a Class D amplifier is because a lot of Class D amplifiers, at least for me, has that glassy upper mid-range that's a bit unrefined and a little bit in your face, for the lack of better words. And that's the type of sound that I just didn't, as a young audiophile, initially I loved the idea of Class D amplifiers. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
I that was my go-to choice, Class D amplifiers. But then I just didn't like it. And when I finally got a Class A and Class AB amplifier, I got a taste of that. I just just never touched Class D amplifiers again until I heard GONFET modules came out, and also Purify at the time. And Purify was very good, but also was a bit analytical for me. And then GONFET came out, and then I heard the AGD Audience at a show. I didn't even know it was Class D amplifier at the time. Got it in, listened to it, and it had the most refined high frequency I've heard in a Class D amplifier. And the upper mid-range dryness, glassiness, whatever you want to call it, non-existent. to me, this sounded straight up like a really good Class A or Class AB amplifier in this small form factor. And I did love the idea of the tube, which made it modular so you can easily upgrade later. But a lot of people didn't like that because they felt that was fake tubes and whatever. I believe they make non-tube versions now as well for those people. But for me, I love the aesthetic. And I loved it so much that initially I had it in the chrome version, which was nice looking, but they were extremely hard to film. And also, I was not a big fan of chrome finishes to begin with, although this one was really nice. And so I decided to, because I planned on keeping this for a long time, because unlike the Bruno Co., the thing about the AGD is that I can throw at any speaker because it has a neutral sound profile. And it is actually the amplifier I throw at any speaker that comes in as almost like a default to get an idea of what that speaker sounds like and what it does. Because again, the AGD has a lot of power, can power virtually any speaker, has a low impedance in the handling, neutral measurements, great measurements, and so on and so forth. So anyhow, it is a very reliable piece, almost a workhorse for me. So I wanted it in a special finish. So I got it customized in like this copper on black kind of finish. And they're actually selling this version now on their website. But basically my involvement with that is it's not a signature version or collaboration by any stretch of the imagination. My involvement with that was basically going to AGD and going, can you please make me a, unit like this, And they were happy to experiment with it. And I guess mine is like the first copper unit they produced. And so I made it kind of like my own aesthetics, and it's just beautiful. I love it. The camera doesn't really do justice compared to what I see in real life. They did a phenomenal job, even better than I thought it would come out. And so just aesthetically, sound-wise, functionality, everything combined, it makes for a piece that I would be pretty heartbroken if it was, gone tomorrow or something.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's yet another product I would love to hear, just because while I am not at all a hater of Class D, in fact, I'm a big proponent of it, I also at the same time have to admit that there's no Class D amp that I've heard so far that I would actually want to live with and use for myself. If it were like my own system, I'm not reviewing it, I'm just listening for fun. I've just yet to come across.
I was the same way, like I said, right? Like I was the exact same way. Until I heard the AGD. And upon hearing the AGD, and because it was GONFET, I kind of correlated the two and thought maybe it's because it's GONFET. Maybe the GONFET is now
that's not
really
it.
close. It unfortunately it wasn't. Like ever since then, I started getting in like a lot of GONFET amplifiers to compare and try to find something that's lower price, because the AGDs are pretty pricey, right? So I use them upstairs, I bring them downstairs. Like I would love to have two, but it's way too pricey for that for me. So I have to alternate from time to time. It's always plugged into a system, either upstairs or downstairs, but never at the same time. So anyhow, but I've gotten a lot of different ones from SMSL now, which very, very, low price for a GONFET. And Topping, Live Harmony, there's many GONFET now, right, that I have in-house. With the exception of the Live Harmony, which I have not compared side by side yet to compare performances, the Live Harmony and the AGD monoblocks are the only ones to me that sounds without that Class D-ness for me. And that is my first time. Like Hypex, Purify, you name it. Like all the Class D amplifiers, ICE modules, all the ones that I've gone through over the years had that Class D-ness. Even with every time there's a new module out, you get that hype where people are like, "Oh, it doesn't sound like Class D anymore," right?
There's the new Hypex, whatever, Purify.
Yeah, so I've always kind of like bought into that and like, I want to try it, right? Because I do love the idea of Class D amplifiers, right? So, I've gone down that road many times, and I was skeptical with the GONFET for sure, but this was the only time where I was like, yes, this does not sound like a Class D amplifier to me. And unfortunately, it's not just about the module, it seems like, right? Like, and unfortunately, it seems like AGD, and the Live Harmony, both of them are on the more pricier end. And so that's unfortunate. but I wish I can say like SMSL sounds just as good for like $200, right? That would be great. But while the SMSL is great, I can tell you right now, even without having the review out, that is not exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to hear either of those products really again at some point maybe.
Yeah.
But because if I run into the same impressions that you have, to me that would indicate that perhaps we're on the precipice of a shift in audio to where maybe these giant, big, heavy, monolithic Class AB, Class A amplifiers are no longer going to be necessary. And you can get away with similar performance for something that you could actually carry without breaking your back.
Well, I would say that I don't think it's gonna replace Class A or Class AB in the sense that while it's similar, like there's something to be said about like big hefty Class A, Class AB amplifiers, and maybe it's just like my brain playing tricks on me, but sometimes it's a scale of sound, right? With bigger amplifiers like Accuphase, for example, the 880, yeah, I just get more sense of kind of robustness and space.
Sure.
That I don't quite get from the AGD. But again, when I put the AGD back in, like there's nothing to complain about. Like it's very neutral, okay, balanced. Like I said, it's not like the Bruno Co where it's a fun sound or color in any way.
Yeah.
While the high frequency is very refined, the upper mid range doesn't have any kind of glare or shoutiness. It's just a very, simple kind of neutral sound.
Yeah.
Right. And people kind of take it for granted, but I think neutrality to someone is kind of hard to come by, like absolute neutrality. Because when I hear gear that's so-called neutral, and I think you have that experience as well, sometimes it's glary, sometimes it's bright, sometimes it's sterile, right? This is not like sterile, it's neutral, it's balanced. There's no bump in the bass, mid-range, or high frequency that I can note of, but it is neutral.
Yeah.
It is neutral. It is it has everything going for it. And yeah, it's a piece I like because it's what's neutral to me. It's probably the only amplifier I found neutral to me with a very fine balance of high frequency that makes it sound musical and easy to listen for long periods of time.
Yeah.
So it's no hidden fact that I love the components I just listed. So
yeah. Oh man, so I guess it's my turn. I'll keep it short and sweet. I don't really have a modern component that I could list. I could list an integrated amplifier, but the truth of the matter is I'm not really attached to any of the stuff that I own. I'm not. All of it could leave. I mean, there's some that I would be sad about, like the Accuphase E800. I'd be sad to see that go, but I wouldn't say I couldn't live without it. But there was a product that I felt I couldn't live without for over a decade, and it was the Totem Acoustic Staff. That's STTAF. It was introduced in I believe, the late 90s, sometime around then. And it had a 20-year run, and I think Totem had like 7 or so different versions of that speaker. My version was made in 2011, or no, 2001 is when I got it. And no, I got it a few years later. But anyways, the bottom line is this. It was my first real audiophile approved speaker, and it was quirky, definitely imperfect, the opposite of neutral. It had a very distinct sound to it. But when I learned how to get it to work in my room and to get it set up right, it created the most emotional listening experiences that I've ever had as a music lover and audiophile. Sometimes I was so like emotionally kind of involved in the music through these speakers that I had to shut the system off. Like it was sometimes just too heavy, bro. I was like, oh, okay.
Make it stop.
Yeah, no, it's just so powerful. Yeah, no, but seriously, I'm sure it's because I was also a hell of a lot younger then, you know how that is. But nonetheless, like it was just this amazing emotional listening experience. And even though I tried so many better speakers, even back then, all the way up to include like Wilson Watt puppies that I owned, nothing brought emotion to the music like the Staff did for me. And I eventually got rid of it after, I believe, around 12 years of ownership, not because I fell out of love with it, but because I was going through this hippie phase of like, hey man, you shouldn't let your stuff like own you. Like, you know, don't love anything that doesn't love you back. Like that kind of mindset. And I was like, I'm attached to these speakers. Like even though they're inanimate objects, like I love this product, I need to practice discipline of getting used to, parting ways with material things. And at the time I wasn't using them. They were just collecting dust because I was just going through so many other different products. I was like, all right, it's time to sell them. And I sold them. Obviously I'm still here. Life goes on, but I wish I would have held on to them because part of me wants to know, would I still have that same reaction? If I get them set up the right way, would I still be like, oh my God, no, this just brings the soul of whatever music I'm listening to the fore in a way that most other products don't for me. But yeah, Totem Staff, circa 2001, is a really special.
I recently had that kind of experience, right?
Okay.
Where I hooked up a vintage JBL speaker, right? And I just was like analyzing it, like I usually do when I do my reviews, and I was like sitting back and listening and going like, oh man, it's so miscentric and it's missing this and missing that and whatever.
Yep.
But then like I just decided to like, let's not do that. Just turn on some music and just sit back and just try to enjoy it. And I sat back and like, after a few days, it just became more like, if we don't think about the individual kind of little things that we usually look for or dissect as reviewers, it was more musical to me.
Yeah.
It was not the most accurate, and that's why I appreciate something like the Bruno Co, where it might not be the most performing in the sense of measurements and perhaps I've never measured it, so I don't know, but measurements and performance and power output and so on, but there's like certain aspects to like what's musical to someone, and I think that matters, right? Like same thing with the Platimons. I think I mentioned like with the super tweeters, with the VC2 module in the bottom, like there's a lot of design choices that I personally don't agree with, like my brain doesn't agree with it, right? Like I'm not a fan of super tweeters in the sense of engineering, right? Like, but with super tweeters, I don't know, like again, I'm gonna get hate for this from the measurement crowd, but I just prefer it. It's just weird. And again, the Platimons are not perfectly linear speakers, yet it's musically engaging to me, right? So there are definitely deviations, but with musical enjoyment, at least in my stereo where I'm not working to editing footages or audio clips or whatever, I do prefer a little bit of coloration. But I did find that over time, maybe because I'm reviewing more modern stuff now with more kind of like linear presentation and stuff like this, I did find that over time, like the vintage sound, like the JBL speakers I threw into my system the other day, sounded more colored than usual, if that makes sense. Like it sounded more colored than I remember it.
Well, you didn't have software developing most of the product. It was largely by ear. Certain things weren't as well understood back then as today. But
it could also be the fact that the rest of the gear is modern too, right?
Yeah, so it could be a lot of different things. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, this is something we discussed earlier. But when it comes to certain products, specifically older products, yes, there's distinct strengths and weaknesses, but I think that's kind of what makes a lot of these products special. I mean, even the ones that you listed that are currently being sold today, they're quirky. They are. This is none of the products that you listed were drop and plop. Like just drop it and then magic is going to happen, or at least really good sound's going to happen. It's like, no, you need to kind of have a clue as to what you're doing. Even my choices kind of follow the same. Except for the AMR.
Yeah, what's funny is like I do have references like the 1528 bookshelf that I can plop in will work great because it's a linear speaker and like you said but there's all rounders, but for some reason maybe it's because like over time I've went through so many speakers and maybe I'm taking it as a challenge. I don't know what it is, but like the speakers that I actually enjoy in my real like system where it's musically engaging to me, and not to say the 1520 is not musically engaging, it's very musically engaging, but the Platimons has that transparency factor that just can't explain what it is exactly, but it's just gravitating towards it. And maybe it's a challenging and personal taste and all that kind of stuff, but and also this is a kind of side tangent, but with the Bruno Co, for people that's curious about, because you can't really demo it. I know I said like you gotta kind of hear it for yourself, but you can't really demo it because it's so direct from Korea. I would say it sounds somewhat like Sensui. So one of the the biggest success I've had with Brunoco is with vintage gear. Sorry, for vintage speakers like JBL, like Pioneer, like vintage speakers do extremely well with the Brunoco, because it kind of has that sensuiness to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
People that get it will get it, but that's the best. That's the best way I can put it. But it's kind of like sensui, kind of,
I feel like you're hurting yourself. We should take that.
I'm just like,
let's take it as a sign to wrap up the video before you have a stroke.
It's just my brain's just malfunctioning.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, let us know in the comment section. What's your top 3 pieces that you can't live without? It doesn't have to be 3. You can list more, you can list less. Let us know in the comment section. Would love to know, and it will maybe help me check out some other gear as well. But yeah, please do share in the comment section. Please click like on this video if it was fun, and if you like Sean's hat. It looks like he did get a new hat.
I did.
I did realize that.
There we go.
Just now. And yeah, and make sure to subscribe for more future videos like this. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one. Until next time.
Peace.
We're driving cars on a Mars tonight. We're blasting